1045 The Team, your home for New York sports. We are joined by the college football reporter for USA Today, Nicole Auerbach joins us. Nicole, let's go simple. Let's start right off the rip. Did they get it right last night? Are these the right four teams in the top four spots?
I think they did. This is the four that I projected and also would have picked. I agree with the consensus that obviously Alabama and now Ohio State are locks at 1-2, although the Buckeyes could drop to 3 or something. I mean, I don't think their fans would care too much about that. And what's going to be really interesting is those two one-loss teams in Clemson and Washington, which both, I think, are facing interesting matchups in their championship game. But I think the way the committee has laid this out, and we know that there have been some changes in years past and abrupt changes from the second to the last rankings, but I think if those two teams win out, Clemson and Washington win out, they're in the playoff, and I agree with that. I mean, I think that below them you have some really good two-loss teams, but these two are one-loss teams that would be conference champions, and in Washington's case, they would have an opportunity to add a top 10 win. In Clemson's case, it would be a top 25 win. But I think it's fairly clear, assuming those two teams win, that I think those picks, I think the top four would stay the same, even despite the committee chair Kirby Hocutt's comments that Washington's resume is still not the greatest strength of schedule and that they are fairly close with number 5 Michigan right now.
You're going to notice a common theme during this interview that Levack and I are going to be rooting for chaos.
That's our thing. We love chaos.
Oh, I love chaos.
Oh, yes.
But I'm saying if there is none, that's how it looks to me.
Well,
I love chaos.
Let's add a little chaos too. Let's say Clemson or Washington go down to their conference title game. Of those two lost teams in the mix, who's the most likely to jump into the top 4?
Well, so I'm going to be on a limb a little bit. I know that there's a renewed sense among Michigan fans that they have a decent shot, but I personally don't believe that they would take two teams from the Big Ten and neither of them played in the conference championship game, because I think that would really send a message about devaluation of conference championship games in general, and also kind of just, I mean, that's supposed to be an important thing. It's supposed to be a part of the thing that preserves the regular season and the excitement around it. Plus, if we're going to have something crazy like two teams making the playoffs for the first time from the same league, I just think one of them is going to be a conference champion. So in that scenario, I think that if Washington or Clemson loses, I think the Big Ten champion then would leapfrog Michigan and that whoever lost, that two-loss team, and get their spot in the playoff. I think it's an easier sell if it's Wisconsin. It would be a little bit harder to take, I think, for Michigan fans in particular, who beat Penn State by 39 points, to not get in and see them go. But I think with either Penn State or Wisconsin, you're adding a top 10 win because both those teams are in the top 10, and you're adding a conference title. I think that would bump them up in the rankings, and I think that's how we would see, and I don't think that that's too much of a long shot, that's how we would see two Big Ten teams in the Final Four.
USA Today's Nicole Auerbach with Levack and Goz right here on 1045 The Team. All right, let's go full anarchy, though, Nicole. Let's say both Clemson and Washington lose. All of a sudden, there's possibly 3 Big Ten teams in the top 4. Do riots start in the streets? Or is that even realistically possible at all?
I think what ends up happening is immediately you see a 6 or 18 playoff next year. But I think that is actually not too far off from happening. And the reason that it sounds crazy but isn't is because, as we've seen each week with these rankings, the committee has a ton of respect for these top-tier Big Ten teams. They put Penn State higher than we had them in the polls right off the bat. I mean, they had a ton of respect for these teams, and I think a lot of it is particularly with Michigan, Ohio State, and Wisconsin is the way they play defense. They pass the eye test, different things like that. But when you have so many teams ranked in the top 10 or the top 7, a loss isn't super damaging. A loss is pretty good. Ohio State's loss on the road to Penn State, not bad at all. That doesn't hurt you. Even Michigan's loss to Ohio State, that's a good loss. You're basically even. You basically tied them. So I think that it's not surprising that we're sort of we're 2 steps removed from a situation where you could see 3 Big Ten teams. And the reason that would play out is because Colorado would have to upset Washington. And the weird thing on this that no one would have predicted at the beginning of the season is that Colorado lost to Michigan. And that didn't seem like a super important non-conference result at the time, but it would come into play here because at that point you have a 2-loss Colorado team that would be in consideration against a 2-loss Big Ten champ and a 2-loss Michigan team. So head-to-head would come into play because it would be being used as a tiebreaker. So that keeps Colorado out. Obviously, Virginia Tech would be out. So at that point, it's basically the Big Ten and maybe an outside shot at the Big 12. But I think because we saw how they were ranked, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State were 9 and 10, and there were plenty of potential at-large teams and also potential Pac-12, like Colorado is above them, and all of these other teams who are getting considered better teams by the committee. We're not going to see a Big 12 team jump up just based on one result because they have hardly played a top 10 opponent. Michigan has 3 wins. So I think if both those teams lose, you have a scenario where you have Alabama, Ohio State, and then whatever order, Michigan, and then the winner of the Big Ten championship game. And it would be insane, but it would go along with what the committee has felt this year, that this is the strongest conference in college football, and that those teams beating up on each other really doesn't detract too much because they're all good teams. It would be crazy, and like I said, I really do think it would spur some action if you're leaving out that many Power 5 conferences from A, the cash grab that this playoff is, and B, the attention and also this sense of importance with a conference championship. If they're meaningless, if you're taking 2 Big Ten teams that didn't even play in it, et cetera, there would be some sort of change. But I'm with you guys that and that's not even total anarchy. That's just 2 losses. And it doesn't even matter what happens in Bedlam, and I think that that's how you see 3 Big Ten teams in.
USA Today's Nicole Auerbach right now with Levack Goz on the team.
So all the bedlam can happen there. Now there's going to be some changes involved in the Pac-12 involving the Oregon football program. They let go of their head coach, Mark Helfrich, today. Is there a possibility we see Chip Kelly coming back to Eugene?
Well, I don't think so. I think you make the call, but I don't think he will leave. Although I do think that Chip Kelly's system and the control he likes to have over the program fits really well for a college program. But that's sort of like with anyone. You call, you make that long shot call to start, and then you move on from there for realistic possibilities. And I think that this is going to be a really interesting search because Oregon could go in a lot of different directions based on what they're looking for, what they want. Obviously, there's people who are looking at Brian Harrison at Boise State. P.J. Fleck could be a huge jump from Western Michigan, but that's a possibility. I've seen Greg Schiano's name mentioned. You could go. They haven't had a search at Oregon in 40 years. They've hired internally, but now it does seem to be kind of a pivotal point in the program, what they want to be moving forward, what style they want to play, what do they want to, who can recruit the top-tier talent that they need, despite the fact that Washington is emerging as a Pac-12 power, and that will affect regional recruiting. So there's a lot of different things that are going to be taken into account, but I would think that Rob Mullins, the AD there, and Phil Knight, obviously in the Nike side of things, I would think that they have a good idea of who's going to say yes to them, because you don't accept and deal with a huge buyout like Mark Helfrich is if you don't have a good idea of what you want and who's probably going to say yes to you.
Nicole Auerbach of the USA Today joining us. We appreciate you helping us. I'm glad that you like anarchy as much as we do. Like, I think people look down their nose at us sometimes over that.
Oh, no, I say it all the time, and I think that it's important. Because, you know what, without chaos, especially in a year like this where there's so many opportunities for it, we're never going to know what it would take to get 2 teams from the same league in, or we're never going to know, like, a non-champion versus a conference champion. So I want to see what the committee does when they're presented with these weird scenarios, and we actually get to see what they're thinking. Because the last year was super easy, and the first year was like, yeah, we didn't really know, and yeah, Ohio State getting in over the Big 12 was like somewhat controversial. Like, this year is going to be way more controversial, and we're actually going to learn some stuff. So I'm super excited about it.
Love it. Nicole, thank you so much for making time for us. And if it's okay with you, we're going to hit you up throughout the playoffs.
Sounds good.